So, we already started this discussion. We are being dealing with the characteristics of a real spiritual person, yogi, or an illumined person. And Arjuna's question in the 54th verse of 2nd chapter, and Lord Krishna's answer running into 18 verses from 55th to 72nd verse. That's a discussion. Sometimes the question arises, why do we need a philosophy of life? Why do we need yoga? It's a simple question. Sometimes this question is asked. When do we feel the need for a philosophy of life? At a physical level, we don't need. Animals don't need a philosophy of life. And if everything goes on all right, then also we never bother about philosophy of life. See, as I said on many previous occasions, in mathematics and in science, we can determine, 2 plus 2 is always 4. It cannot be anything else. We can program a machine and we can be very sure how the machine is going to work. We can predict, we can determine how a machine is going to work because we have programmed an intelligence into that, and we know very well how it is going to function. But we cannot determine, we cannot predict our own life. And life is full of dilemmas, problems that scientifically we cannot explain. Because sometimes, people work hard and don't get the result or get the opposite result. Swami Vivekananda explains this in another context while explaining the mystery of Maya. Maya is a very important term in Indian philosophy, especially in Advaita. Very often Maya is understood to be sometimes delusion, illusion. It is horribly misunderstood and misinterpreted. Sometimes Maya, you find in older translations of Vedantic texts, Maya is often interpreted as illusion. And illusion is nothing but the feeling that something exists when in reality it doesn't exist. That is illusion, optical illusion and so on. Now, the question of the mystery of life, the unpredictability of life, that's what really leads us to this idea of Maya. Or the logical inconsistency. That also can be interpreted as Maya. Swami Vivekananda gives a very, very simple example. At once it is very touching and psychologically very profound. A mother brings up her child, giving all attention, maybe spending a lot of money, devoting all her time, energy, everything to bring up the child. And the child becomes a rogue. Now, 2 plus 2 is 4, no doubt. In a laboratory, if you put different chemicals together in identical conditions, if you perform an identical experiment, the result also will be identical. But here, see what is the input? The input is time, energy, money, everything. Or you may help your friend, you may help your colleague with so much of sacrifice, so much of devotion and dedication. And the colleague's reaction is just the opposite. So there is an inconsistency, which you don't find in a laboratory experiment or in mathematics. 2 plus 2 is always 4. If identical chemicals are put together, the result will be identical. But in life, the input is something and the output is something totally inconsistent. So we are in a dilemma. Now, how do we explain this indeterminability, or whatever you may call it, inexplicability. It is Maya. So Swami Vivekananda says Maya is a statement of fact. Somewhere we come to a dead wall where we cannot proceed 1 inch beyond. A dilemma. This dilemma is one aspect of Maya in human life. And to explain this, or maybe to run away from this dilemma, in most cases, as an attempt to run away from this dilemma, people turn to philosophy, mysticism, sometimes poetry, sometimes literature, and sometimes so many other problems. If you read the lives of Dostoevsky, you find the man was mostly fully drunk. He was swimming in vodka. What do you call vodka? But then, and out of this came out the greatest literary classics of the world. Brothers of Karamazov, Crime and Punishment, Poor Folk and Gambler, and so on. Now, he ran away from the realities, the horrible realities of life, and something else came out. But still, he was trying to run away. Now, in Vedanta, the explanation is, instead of running away, if you investigate into the true nature of this mystery of life, this uncertainty or inexplicability of life, it is called yoga. In other words, yoga is an attempt to evolve in a new direction, to lift ourselves away from the physical, the mental, the psychological, and even the intellectual, and lift ourselves to the spiritual level. What exactly is my true nature? Who am I, or what am I? The question. Krishna answers this problem. He says, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parthamanogadan atmani eva atmana tushtaha sthita prajnastadhochyati. So who is a man of illumination? That's subject. And Krishna's answer is, when you are completely satisfied within yourself, when you are completely contented within yourself, in the realization that you are the Atman, you are not the physical body, not the mind or intellect, but you are something that goes beyond all this. That realization alone can make a person truly spiritual. He is the person of illumination. When a person completely casts away all desires of the mind, desires should be interpreted. See, sarvan parthamanogadan means kaman means desires. Mental, psychological desires. What you can say, vagaries. All kinds of vagaries. Wavering of the mind. The way mind wanders about things. It will be explained here in the same context. Lord Krishna gives a graphic description of how the mind is dragged into various objects of desire by the 5 senses of perception, how the eyes, the ears, the sense of touch, the sense of smell, the sense of taste, all these, how they drag the mind towards external objects, and how the mind is trapped and caught, and how the mind perpetually struggles within this trap of desires, obsessions, and attachment. That picture Lord Krishna gives in the succeeding pages beginning with Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaka Sangaste Shubhajayat. We will come to that later. Now, Lord Krishna says, the moment we can detach ourselves, completely isolate ourselves from these desires, we will realize that we are not these physical or psychological or intellectual entities. Sometimes people are very much puzzled. How can we detach ourselves from desires? Without a desire, how can human beings live? Without a motive, without a purpose, Because if we need a point of focus to divert our energy, time, our ability to work. All should be focused. And not only that, without a sense of motive, how can we succeed? How can we do anything in life? From a psychological point of view, it is almost impossible. So what Lord Krishna means is that we should not be, not that we should become inactive. We can detach ourselves from obsession, from being too much obsessed with the material objects, desires, even while being very active, while looking after our duties and responsibilities as a professor, as a teacher, as a doctor, as a mother or a husband, whatever may be our position in social or family structure, whatever it may be. We can be busy doing all these duties, performing all these responsibilities. Still, somehow, we can keep within ourselves the idea that we are something beyond this body, beyond this mind, beyond this intellect. We are the Atman, we are the all-pervading, immanent consciousness. This idea, if we can keep in mind, that helps us to enjoy eternal peace and happiness. Very often, yoga is interpreted as a way, as a path for freedom, and also as a path for liberation from pain and pleasure. This freedom from pain and pleasure is achieved by just a change of approach in our mind, not by psychologically killing all mental ideas or desires. What happens is, the moment we get the conviction that we are the Atman, which is eternal, which is beyond the body, beyond the intellect, which is immortal, which is not touched or trapped by any of these waverings of the mind, that conviction gives us a tremendous sense of perfection. This idea of perfection, because every desire is the effect of a feeling of imperfection, a feeling of incompleteness. Now, the moment we feel that we are complete, we are perfect, we may work, we may achieve many things, we may accomplish many things in this world, but still, within ourselves, we will have this strong conviction that we are the Atman. I mentioned this on another occasion, maybe not in this in the Friday class. There is an interesting story which I mentioned earlier, but it is very, very important in this context. In the Mahabharata, there is a story of a man of spiritual illumination. He is a great Vedantic, he is a great yogi. He is a Siddhaprajna, as mentioned in the second chapter, a person who has reached the highest degree of spiritual perfection. But he is not sitting in a cave or a mountain or in an ashrama or in an isolated place. He is sitting in a marketplace. And there also he is not sitting and meditating, sitting there. He is engaged in his duty. And what was his duty? He is a meat seller. He is a butcher. Then interesting story. I mentioned this earlier. And that butcher appears in Mahabharata as a great teacher of Vedanta and Yoga. And whom does he teach? He teaches a professional yogi. A person, a young man who left his home, left his wife and children. Maybe he was not married, of course, in the story comes. He was very young. He wanted to become a yogi. He wanted to get the highest spiritual realization. He went to a forest, and there he sat for some time. He became very proud of his occult powers, and he went to an old housewife's home. There he became a bit annoyed, and the housewife, because she asked him to wait for some time, But he got some wise words. He heard some wise words from the housewife. Why I'm going rather fast and in brief, because I have narrated this story on many occasions. It runs into almost 35 verses in a famous Purana, but in Mahabharata it appears in a small verse. The point is, Vidhava Brahmachari Samvadaha. That is Sanskrit term, means a dialogue between a lady and a great yogi. And finally, the lady directs this man to a butcher who is sitting in a forest, a marketplace, and his name is Vyadha, and that Vyadha teaches this yogi great spiritual truths, words of wisdom. And what was he doing? As I said earlier, he was fully engaged in doing his duties and responsibilities. But that portion of the Mahabharata, known as Vyadha Gita, means a song full of wisdom, sung by the great butcher saint. That's the name. Now, you can imagine, and this man is presented as a typical man of wisdom. It doesn't mean that every butcher is a wise man. It doesn't mean. The idea is, spiritual wisdom could be practiced even in the midst of being engaged in activities which we normally do not consider to be very conducive to spirituality or religion, or even ethics for the matter. That's the idea behind. If Vyadha's words of wisdom had come from a saint sitting in a hermitage, it won't be a great surprise. But this man is not meditating there. He is doing his duty and responsibility. But then he said, well, this is my work. I am not attached to the work I am doing, though I am doing it with great efficiency, with great attention, with great focus, great enthusiasm. But at the same time, he is not attached to that. And the reason is, though he is doing in this work, in his mind, he does not consider himself to be a physical being engaged in the work of a butcher. Rather, he is the Atman, the eternal consciousness. With that realization within, he is able to do that. And then Lord Krishna says, that person becomes fully satisfied and contented. Now, this is a very important expression here. This contentment is the real sign of a spiritual person. Please remember, it doesn't mean that one should be always merry, cutting jokes, very humorous, very, extrovert and socializing with people. No, that's not what I mean. This contentment is an inner spiritual state. In fact, many people who are extremely humorous, as I said last occasion, cutting jokes all the time, in fact, they are trying to cover up the inner conflicts. That's what a psychiatrist will tell you. Very often, people who are too prone to jokes and humor, they are trying to cover up, conceal the inner nagging feeling, discontentment, and often some inner conflicts. Now, this contentment is the contentment that comes out of the real experience that I am the Atman. That person will be very sensitive, as I said in the last class. Such a person will be serious. He be very focused. He be very efficient. He may punish the criminals if he is a king. As I said, in philosopher kings, I mentioned in the last class, philosopher kings. Many of the great philosopher kings of ancient times were typical examples of spiritual perfection, illumination. They were doing all this work, but within them the contentment, and that contentment comes out of an inner satisfaction, which is not associated with the achievement of anything empirical, anything material. Because if we get money, it will be lost. So when we get money, we are happy. When it is lost, we become unhappy. So happiness and unhappiness are interrelated. Just two sides of the same coin. You cannot have happiness without the possibility of unhappiness sometime later. So happiness or contentment associated with anything empirical is momentary. But the happiness associated with the inner spiritual illumination is everlasting. And that is the idea mentioned here, Atmani eva atmana tushtaha, in the 54th verse. And again, this is the highest reach of religious life also. Normally, in religious traditions, there are different approaches to the divine, to God. In some of the Semitic traditions, you can never go beyond a limit. Human beings are either servants, slaves, or warriors fighting for God. Obedient slaves or servants or warriors in some religions. In Christianity, at the same time, there is an element of identity. I and my father are one. Still, there is an element of separation also in Christian mystical tradition. In Ramanuja system, Vaishnava, most of the Vaishnava religious systems are like that. But in Advaitic tradition, the spiritual seeker finally realizes that what he seeks, the God whom he seeks, whom he is trying to realize, is actually the spirit that is present in all beings. It's not that a human being claims to be God. It's not very often, this could be terribly misunderstood. It's not that a person claims to be God. What happens is, the spiritual seeker at the highest level realizes that that divine reality, whom we may call God, is at the highest level of spiritual evolution, is realized to be present in all beings, to be omnipresent, all-pervading. And it's not a person who creates this world and sits outside of the universe, which he creates. Rather, at the highest level, he is within. Now, this is not the beginning of spiritual evolution. At the beginning, one may not get the feeling, Atmani eva atmana tushtaha. Well, I am the Atman. This feeling may not come. Because at the beginning, a devotee may feel, well, I have enjoyed the grace of God. That also will have the same effect. In fact, in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna gives a list of characteristics of an ideal devotee of God. A real devotee, of course. And there, one of the important characteristics that he gives, Sandushta Satatam Yogi Yatatma Dridhanishchayaha. Mayarpida Manobuddhiri Yoman Bhakti Samayaprika. There, in the 12th chapter, Lord Krishna says, who is the ideal devotee? And the first important characteristic that is outlined is, he becomes Santushta, means he enjoys inner contentment, profound spiritual satisfaction, an inner contentment. This contentment comes to a devotee of God, a person who goes to church, a person who goes to temple, or a person who goes to a meditation hall and comes out terribly angry. That person is not really meditating. That inner contentment is an integral part of spiritual life. That's why Lord Krishna says, the word used is tushtaha, means a person who is contented within himself. Highest degree of contentment, satisfaction. So, this satisfaction is found not only in Advaitic tradition, in the spiritual life in Advaitic tradition, but also in a devotee, in devotional tradition, in monotheistic tradition, in which God is perceived to be outside of the universe, where there is always a separation between God and man. But even in such monotheistic or even dualistic traditions, inner contentment is the first sign of a devotee of God, of a yogi. Remember, yoga here means any kind of spiritual effort to evolve to a higher plane of consciousness. That is the meaning in which yoga is interpreted in Gita. I often want to stress this point. Yoga, as understood and expounded in the Gita, has got a very profound meaning. If Swami Vivekananda refers to this, yoga speeds up our evolution in one context, he says. And of course, Swamiji, yoga is a path to freedom. All these statements you find. Speeding up evolution. See, physical evolution has come to an end. We cannot grow another head or another hand we cannot have. Because physical evolution has come to an end. So there is a higher, another type of evolution that we have, that we can achieve. And Vivekananda says, at the higher evolution, the human being realizes his true nature. He realizes that he is not a physical or intellectual or psychological being. He is a divine reality. Means human being evolving into the divine being. That is evolution, as Swami Vivekananda understands. Any effort to achieve this freedom, this higher evolution, is understood to be yoga in the context of Bhagavad Gita. That point should be always kept in mind, because yoga, the word yoga is being used here in a very broad, in a very scientific, in a very profound sense. Any human attempt to liberate ourselves from obsession with our body, with anything that is perishable, with anything that is momentary and material, that is yoga. Because that is the beginning of our search for freedom. Freedom here means freedom from the tyranny of the senses, freedom from the tyranny of the physical pull of every human being, freedom to evolve, the ability to evolve to a higher dimension of human personality. And Lord Krishna says here, a spiritually illumined person is one who reaches this highest level of spiritual evolution by realizing the presence of the divine in his being itself, and also the presence of the same reality as the all-pervading truth. That is the real characteristic of a yogi. Lord Krishna makes this statement here. Now, of course, after this, he continues. Now, how does such a person behave? How will he interact? How will such a person interact with the rest of the world? Very often, yoga or spiritual perfection is interpreted to be, or misunderstood to be, a kind of complete withdrawal from social responsibilities, contact with other human beings, expressing a having a grim expression on the face and all. See, once this happened, in a very interesting episode in Swami Vivekananda's life. He was in this country from 1893 he came here, and right from the Parliament of Religion 1893 till 1896 he lived in the United States, and 96 April he left for London. So all these more than 3 years he stayed here. So he moved all over this country, and many people met him, professors, many great devotees, both men and women, they all met him. So they noticed one difference, because they had seen these big ecclesiastical divines, big clergymen, those who belong to the higher clergy, who had come to the Parliament of Religion. They were very, very formal, very pompous, with a strong, grim expression on their face, and no-nonsense attitude clearly visible on their expressions. And here this young man, Vivekananda, who happened to be the most popular, prominent speaker to attend the Parliament of Religion, he was very very, very, very free, very happy, absolutely informal. So there is a great contrast. Now things may be changing, but even now in the normal training, in divinity schools or in ecclesiastical institutes, you find the prominent members of the higher clergy are expected to behave in a very grim, serious manner. That is true in many of the great ashramas of India also. The Mahamandalesh, they have to sit in a very formal way, speak only in the old classical Sanskrit, nothing to the common people out. That is sign of spiritual greatness. Now, and here this man of comparatively young man of 30 years, he was very free, and he behaved like any normal human beings. Then somebody asked him, Swamiji, why do you behave like this? He said, I also get a bit grim and serious when I have a stomach pain. That was his thought. Now Swamiji was sending out a message, physical expression, complete insensitivity with other people, withdrawal from the rest of the world. That is not spirituality. That is not a sign of real spiritual growth. A really spiritual person will be very sensitive towards the problems of other people. And he will never be callous or indifferent or insensitive. His sensitivity will be of a spiritual sensitivity. It's not confined to the physical relationship. It means a brother may be friendly to his brother. Maybe a father may be very protective towards his children. So these are all relationships based on family links and all that. But a spiritually enlightened person will look upon the whole humanity with great concern, as his own brothers and his own fraternity, brothers or sisters, whatever may be. But he will not be attached. He will be caring, he will have a human concern, he will have a very humanitarian attitude, approach towards everything. But it is not based on attachment, because attachment is restrictive. I mean, we are attached to our own people, which in other words means we are not so very concerned with others. So normal attachment, normal human relationship is always like a coin which has two sides. On the one hand, you love and have concern for certain people, but the same person will have either hatred or maybe total callous feeling, totally indifferent towards other human beings. But a spiritually enlightened person, he will be equally caring, having concern for all, because he is not attached to anything. His concern is based upon a kind of universal spiritual humanism. It is not restricted. So, Lord Krishna in the 57th verse says, Yes sarvatra anabhisneha. He is unattached. He doesn't have any particular love for anyone, which means he has love for all. That's meaning. Anybody who looks upon the whole humanity as his own spiritual family will not have any particular concern for anybody, because the particular concern implies its opposite to some others. So, Lord Krishna says, such a spiritually enlightened person will have love, affection, concern for all. Why? Because he is not attached. He or she is not attached. And he is not particularly happy when something good happens. And he is not particularly unhappy when something bad happens. See, I can here refer to an interesting description of Lord Krishna's character as explained in a classic called Bhagavad Purana, which depicts his life and teachings. Now there, it is said that Lord Krishna, the teacher of Bhagavad Gita, had one special attribute. He never wept, never cried, and never smiled. The smile was there, but it was not a very, not a jubilant, an expression of any kind of enjoyment or joy or happiness. He was, and he never doubted. When something happened, something unpleasant happens, he was never worried. At the same time, when something something pleasant happened, he was never jubilant. The explanation is simple. Now, if you can look at life as a circle, not as a straight line, you become aware of the whole dimension. I can try to explain this maybe in a more graphic and simpler language. See, why do we become unhappy normally? When an unhappy event takes place, we become terribly upset because we think, by mistake, we think that unhappy episode is a permanent phenomenon. It will be there all the time. It will have a permanent effect on our life. It is a permanent phenomenon, we think. So we become terribly upset. Of course, soon we get over this unhappiness. That is true. But when something shocking or tragic happens, when we become completely upset, it's because by mistake, somehow we misinterpret that unhappy event as something permanent, something everlasting, which is really not true. Soon it will pass away. And again, when something very pleasant, something that gives us happiness and joy, takes place, we become terribly happy. Terribly happy is not a very good expression, but I mean that happiness has a terrible aspect behind it. That's why I'm saying. Because that happiness will soon go away. But we become extremely happy, we forget ourselves, we become overjoyed. Because we think that event, that pleasant, happy event is permanent. But really, after some time, something unhappy happens, and this happy event is forgotten. So happiness and unhappiness, it goes on rotating. But we don't realize this. Anything that gives us a shock is taken to be a permanent situation, a permanent event or phenomenon. We forget the fact that it will soon go away. Something pleasant will happen. Again, if something pleasant happens, we become overjoyed, forgetting that this pleasant event will be short-lived. So when we see an object, when we experience something, we focus only on the momentary aspect of that event. That's the reason why we become extremely happy sometimes and extremely unhappy at some other times. Now, Lord Krishna could see the past, present and future as a single dimension. So if anything tragic happens, he was not very much worried. He knew very well this tragic event will soon go away. Because he could see the whole entire phenomenon as one cycle. He could see in his mind the entire event. He could see both sides of the coin. If you see only one side of the coin, we think we become extremely happy, and after some time, when we see the other side, we become extremely unhappy. But if we could see both sides of the coin simultaneously, we never become either extremely happy or extremely unhappy. Because he could see the whole thing as a single dimension. So Purnat, that's why it is said, the past, present and future appear to him as one undivided whole. Normally we see only the present. Past we forget. Future also we forget. So we see only the present and we become extremely happy or unhappy. but somebody who could see the past, present, and also future at one stroke, at one glance, will not be happy or unhappy. Now, a Siddhaprajna, a spiritually enlightened person, may not become like Lord Krishna, but he gets a little bit of this. Because as he spiritually evolves to a higher and higher level, he attains this inner wisdom, inner poise, mental poise, to realize that all that happens around is only a momentary phenomenon, is not everlasting, an unhappy event need not shock us. A happy event need not make us overjoyed, extremely too happy, because the happy event will pass away, and the unhappy event also will pass away. Why? Because we know the truth. Now, this makes us unattached. This wisdom takes away the attachment, and it makes us unattached to whatever is happening around us. Therefore, what happens is not extremely happy when something good happens, and he is not extremely unhappy when something unpleasant happens. This is the sign of wisdom. This wisdom is profound and everlasting, and this wisdom is the wisdom of spiritual realization. In fact, it cannot be obtained through training. If we go to any respectable restaurant, government office, hotel, or any of these places, the trained, paid staff are trained to behave always with a smile. They won't quarrel with you because lose their business. And they may be angry with you, but they won't show that. Diplomats also. Maybe nations will be fighting with each other. But when they meet in Davos and international meeting places, you see how they shake hands. If you see the picture, the photo of Neville Chamberlain shaking hands with Hitler in 1939-38, that Hitler Chamberlain treaty, you find Hitler is so happy. He's preparing for war. He was preparing to invade Poland and Czechoslovakia, all these countries, but very happy. So this kind of diplomatic external poise or balance or steadiness, diplomatic programmed, trained mental poise will not last for long. But this here, the mental poise and steadiness of wisdom with Lord Krishna refers to here is based on one inner spiritual experience. I am the Atman, I am not the physical body. So whatever happens around me at the physical level, at the empirical level, is not everlasting. These things come and they go, but Atman alone remains. That's the only absolute reality. I am that Atman within. This wisdom gives us a tremendous spiritual poise, mental balance. Perhaps one may ask the question, it is something to be achieved at the spiritual level, at the experience level. What's the use of reading all this? I explained this in the last class, but it is so very profound and important. That's why I'm trying to explain it again. Shankaracharya in his commentary says, even if you feel that you have not reached this level, this spiritual realization, read it again and again. Remind yourself of these characteristics and try to practice these characteristics little by little. These characteristics should be studied, listened to, read and profoundly meditated upon, and then slowly we will find we slowly attain some of these characteristics. So these are ideas and ideals to be aimed at, to be seriously contemplated upon by spiritual seekers. But they are very natural for those who have reached the highest level of spiritual evolution. For a spiritually enlightened person, illumined person, these are natural. But for a spiritual seeker, these are ideas and ideals to be aimed at. They should study, contemplate upon these ideas. Slowly, these ideas will become their characteristics also. Not all of a sudden, but slow by slow. It may take some births, several births perhaps. But daily studying these ideas or reading these books, these verses or the translation, whatever may be, keeping ourselves acquainted with these ideas itself is a great spiritual training. That's what Shankaracharya writes in his commentary. That is the real benefit of these things. How does a spiritually enlightened man or woman behave? If you understand, if we make it a regular habit to study and contemplate upon, naturally we find suddenly we are also slowly imbibing some of these characteristics. That's the idea behind. And he says, and that person na abhinandati na dveshti. He doesn't hate anyone, and that person doesn't show his happiness or his pleasure with any person. He doesn't praise anybody and doesn't condemn anybody. That person remains in a state of perfect, steady wisdom. In the next verse, there is a imagery. An example is given. The example is taken from the life of tortoise. Tortoises, when they suddenly feel there are some other animals, bigger animals, maybe predators, they feel that there's danger nearby, so they're very careful. So what happens? They will withdraw their limbs. It's a natural reflex action. To protect itself, the tortoise withdraws its limbs. Similarly, a person should be able to withdraw the senses from sense objects. This also needs some explanation. Can we really withdraw the senses from sense objects? Can we withdraw the eyes from visual objects or the ears from audio objects? Suppose somebody is lighting an incense stick. Can we withdraw our sense of smell from the perfume? These are the questions. So the explanation is this. One can withdraw, not physically, but at a spiritual level. Even while living in the midst of sensory objects, even while being engaged in activities which may not apparently be very conducive to spiritual life, one can remain free from their influences by contemplating on this spiritual dimension of our personality. That is the implication here. So we have already seen the example of the butcher saint who was doing his work in his butcher shop, and he was teaching great spiritual wisdom to a saint, to a yogi. Now, while doing this work, while being engaged in this work, how could he remain himself unattached? How could he withdraw his senses from sense objects? It physically may not be, but senses and sense objects, their relationship are not confined to the physical level. At the grossest level, whatever we see with our eyes can influence our mind. But if our mind is fixed on a higher spiritual ideal, the visual object will not leave a lasting impression on the mind. That's the idea behind. If we go on listening to highly disturbing music, disturbing noises, which certainly may not be helpful in spiritual life, still, even while hearing all these, if one could read a good book or contemplate on some great spiritual idea, the effect of these audio objects will be reduced. Because the sense object and mind, they function together. Suppose we keep our eyes open and see a visual object in front of us. Our eyes come in contact with the visual object and it leaves its mark in our mind only when the mind and eyes come together. If mind is not there, if the eyes are focused on the visual object, we won't be seeing that. Again, when some vehicles are moving in the streets, if our mind is not accompanying the ears towards that object from where the noise is coming, we won't be hearing that noise. So hearing or seeing or any of the sensory experiences are always possible with the help, with the association of mind. If mind is not involved, sensory experiences are impossible. Therefore, Lord Krishna says, even while living in this world, if we can focus our mind not on the sense objects, but on the higher spiritual reality, we can live in the midst, we can live in a market and still meditate on God. That is the idea behind this. In fact, this idea is explained in a very graphic style in a dialogue in one of the Upanishads. It comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There is a famous verse. In one very, very famous verse. It begins as a dialogue between a great philosopher king, like the philosopher kings we mentioned here, and also another saint, Yajnavalkya, who is a teacher. When the philosopher came to the king's court, the emperor's court, the emperor puts a question to him. The question is very simple apparently. How are we able to see different objects in this world during daytime, let us say? The saint answered, well, because sunlight. Without sunlight, we won't be able to see anything, any object. And then the king asked the next question. Well, when the sun sets in the west, after the sunset, how do we see different objects? How are we able to live in the world, move about? You have to think of the dialogue that must have taken place 7,000 years back. So, the saint answered, moonlight. Then suppose there is neither sunlight nor moonlight. Then how can we see different objects? Apparently very simple, mind you. But with the fifth question, it enters the most profound spiritual metaphysical discussion in the Upanishadic Vedantic literature. The third question is, suppose there is neither sunlight nor moonlight, how do we see different objects? Fire. We can light a fire. Fourth question, there is neither sunlight nor moonlight nor fire. How do we see things around? Now here the dialogue takes a new turn. We don't see anything if there is neither sunlight nor moonlight nor a candle or a fire. So what do you mean by seeing? Seeing means how do we become aware of different objects? What is the source of awareness? What is the light that enables us to see and become aware of things? During daytime, what is the light? Sunlight. Nighttime, moonlight. When there is neither sunlight nor moonlight, fire. Okay. But suppose there is neither sunlight, moonlight or fire. Then what is the source of awareness, consciousness? How do we become aware of things? Then the saint answered, speech. So light here means anything that makes us aware of different objects, different things. The source of awareness is light. Something that reveals different objects. After all, that is what is called light. When the light is gone, nothing is revealed. So what is really light in science called Jyoti, called Jyoti Brahmanam, it is called Jyotisham Jyoti. The light of light, that is a subject of discussion. So, suppose there is neither sunlight, nor moonlight, nor fire, still we become aware of the fact that there is a car moving in the street, maybe an ambulance, because of speech in noise, the audio phenomenon we call, the noise. That noise becomes light. Noise becomes an instrument which reveals the fact that there is a vehicle moving in the street, which makes us aware of the existence of a vehicle or a car moving in the street. The fifth question, that is a conclusion, and that is the beginning of a profound, long discussion. Then the king asked the question. Now look here, Yajnavalkya. Yajnavalkya is the name of a saint. There is neither sunlight, nor moonlight, nor fire, and you are deaf. Then what do you do? And now, so it is as good as you can sit with the eyes closed, and your ears are not functioning because you are deaf. Nothing is visible. But still, when you are sitting like that, certain things happen within your system. What happened yesterday, what happened this morning, whatever you have seen this morning, you will be contemplating upon. You will be thinking within. You're walking in the open, maybe in the road under blazing sun, and when you are sitting in the dark room, again you re-experience that. Again you feel, you relive that experience of walking under the blazing sun. Now, what is the source of light? How do we remember things? How do we relive previous experiences? If we are just the physical beings, it is not possible. If we are mental or intellectual beings, intellect and mind can perceive things only at a momentary basis. But here there is something which was present in the morning and also present now, and which helps you to remember, relive previous experiences. What is that light? So that answer is given Atma Jyoti. That means even in the absence of external lights, this light within, Jyoti means light, this light of Atman is always present. If this light of Atman were not present, you won't be able to see a visual object, even there are 1,000 lights in this room. We won't be able to hear anything. So all other lights borrow their ability to reveal things from this Atman. So Atman is the light of light. Light here means revealer. Atman reveals itself, and the presence of Atman reveals other objects. So, and what is this Atman? This Atman is within. Now what Lord Krishna says is this. Once we realize that we are the light of light, that Atman within, the light which reveals everything, the light without which all other things will remain unrevealed, then we become truly contented, truly satisfied. This is the sign of the characteristic of a great spiritual person of illumination. So we'll continue this discussion in the next class. Before conclude, there is an announcement. We will not have class next Friday, April 11th. The next class will be on Friday, April 18, here in this hall, in Vivekananda Hall, 7:30 as usual. So we will have all the classes in this hall for at least maybe nearly 2 years, let us hope. And next Friday we will have no class. Please remember, next class will be April 18th, Friday. So thank you. If you want any discussion, anything to be clarified, we have some time, little time. I will conclude. Any point to be discussed?
The butcher, you talk about doing karma yoga, and where did the butcher get his ability to discriminate so beautifully before finding his way in his work? I mean, it makes it sound like he came out and started doing butcher work, and through that alone, surely there was training, meditation.
Yes. Now, yoga as a whole, we have to take as the path to freedom. Those who are of an active nature can practice karma yoga. Those who are of an emotional nature can practice what we call bhakti yoga, the path of devotion. Those who are of a philosophical, rationalizing nature can practice jnana yoga. And those who want to meditate and control the mind, they can practice Raj Yoga. This is the description. Now, in Karma Yoga, to begin with, one should become familiar with these ideas. Second point is, Karma Yoga will be thrust upon all of us. Because at one point or other, we'll ask the question, I did so much. See, this is the result. Where is the explanation? So we have to understand this explanation can be found only if you understand the mystery of yoga. So unless we are free from attachment, there will be no way out from this dilemma. So very often yoga is thrust upon us, whether we like it or not, because that is a mystery of the world. So in the beginning I discussed, why do we need a philosophy in life? Why do we need poetry in life? If we are living purely at a physical level, we won't think of anything transcendental. So sometimes we feel that our calculations, as I said, 2 plus 2 is 4 in mathematics, not in life. In life, 2 plus 2 equation won't work. So much of input, but output is just the opposite. As in the beginning I explained this. People feel forced to read philosophy and mysticism because they find there are many questions and dilemmas in life for which there is no answer. Either in any physical sciences or in any other sciences. So, Lord Krishna says, the problem can be solved only by reducing our obsession with the expectations and result of the work we are doing. All disappointments, all dilemmas are rooted in one problem, our obsessive attachment towards the result of whatever we do. It's not that we should be indifferent towards the work we are doing, not at all. Indifference is not what is meant. In fact, Lord Krishna makes a very interesting statement with the great psychological insight. He says, indifference is the antithesis, the opposite of Karma Yoga. In fact, a real practitioner of Karma Yoga ought to be able to function and work with greater efficiency. He is not worried about the result, which instead of making him indifferent, gives him more energy because he is free from anxiety. See, if you are so much obsessed with the result of the work, this anxiety will take away a lot of our concentration and energy. Worry and anxiety will reduce our focus and concentration. And to that extent, the result also will be reduced. I mean, the quality of the work also will go down. But if we can work with great enthusiasm, efficiency, at the same time, no anxiety, we will be able to work more efficiently. That is the point. So, to begin with, I would say the Karma Yoga, at one point or other, Karma Yoga is thrust upon us. Because many people are not aware of this method, this secret of yoga. They turn to some other directions to escape from this dilemma. Lord Krishna says, instead of knocking at the wrong doors, turn to yoga, then you can work, live in this world, do your duty efficiently, at the same time, you can feel the happiness within, because you are not suffering from anxiety. That's the problem. So yoga philosophy is a psychological necessity for the problems of modern world. It's a psychological necessity, it's a psychological answer to many of the problems. That's why I can quote one verse in the Gita, Saktaha karmani avidvamso yadha kurvanti bharata kuryat vidvan tatha asaktaha chigishu loka sangraham. Very famous verse. It reveals the secret of karma yoga. You know what he says? Lord Krishna says, what is the difference between these two people? One person works with great enthusiasm, efficiency, zeal, but full of attachment, full of obsession, and full of anxiety, full of neurosis, taking lot of pills for diabetes, hypertension, BP, everything. But very successful. Millions of billions of dollars in the bank. But most of the time, the hospitals have medication. Very successful. Then there is a yogi on the other side. That yogi is as efficient, as energetic, as enthusiastic, as successful, but no anxiety. Why? Because he keeps in his mind, well, all these things come and go. So, he is not attached to those things. He is free from obsession. The word attachment should be interpreted as obsession. Obsessive attachment to as a result, which binds you, it becomes a nagging experience within. So Lord Krishna says, the latter person is a yogi. He is also equally successful, if not more successful. If you read the history of human civilization, all the highest and most successful persons were great yogis. Jesus was a yogi in that way. Remember, yoga should be, I want to remind you again and again, yoga doesn't mean growing a beard, sitting and meditating. No, yoga is a total philosophy and approach towards life. All other types of dimensions of yoga are only certain elements of this total philosophy of life. Yoga in Gita means a total, a complete scientific and rational philosophy of life. A complete philosophy of life. An approach and attitude towards the whole mystery of human life. That is what yoga means. That yoga helps a person to be successful, at the same time proceed in the path of spiritual progress. That's the difference. So, we need not wait for yoga to come to us. We'll be forced to knock at the doors of yoga. If we think, whenever the mind is in trouble, whenever there is a worry or anxiety, you have to turn to yoga. People turn to opposite direction. But that Lord Krishna says there is a sublime path. It's a very healthy, spiritually, very healthy path. A road that opens the way to freedom. So we'll continue on April 18th. Thank you. Welcome to this new location. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.